to be in the way.
So I'm going to take some time and you can come up like something. And these are two tilers. This is north and south. This will be a little better view. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining, and I apologize for being late. I was waiting for makeup and just ready to show. You know how that goes, right? Honestly, I gotta go. So, in all seriousness, the reality is camp is so big now overnight with the influx of resources, and it's not really accommodating the capacity of folks and their numbers. And getting out in the morning is ridiculous. Not to mention, it's pretty much zero visibility, believe it or not, because of the smoke. You would think it would settle even further, but we're right where camp is. For those that are familiar, going up 124 towards Yosemite, just past Rainbow Pools, there's a left-hand turn, Cherry Lake Road. Go up the spinning wheel grade, as it's called, and right at the top, there's a piece of private called Drew Meadow, and that's where camp is. Well, even at that elevation, it's completely full of smoke. So you can imagine folks that are unfamiliar with our roads to begin with in the area, not being able to see anything, and then you would think simple stuff like when you burn all the reflectors, the reflective paddles off the sides of the roads, you can't see anything. And now there's no contrast between vegetation and road because it's all black. So anyways, enough of that excuses. My name is Todd McNeil. For those that I haven't met or haven't seen before, I am the chief here at Twain Harte. I am also what's called a Division Crew Supervisor assigned to the Central Sierra Incident Management Team that took over this fire after the first day. The idea of an incident management team, they are teams of individuals that can be formed together to handle any type of emergency. And so we call it an all-risk team or all-hazard team. In this case, it's a wildland fire, which is our most typical application. And the idea of the team concept across the country is it's very localized. And when you have a localized team, you have members on that team that have site-specific knowledge of what we call our home turf or our province. And for our team, it's the Stanislaus National Forest, the Sierra National Forest, the Sequoia National Forest, Yosemite and Kings Canyon National Park. So it's a big, very active area. I've been on that team for 9 years. And I can tell you it is a very busy team because of the activity, and it's a very good team. Don't let the fire's progression be a reflection of the quality of personnel assigned to this incident. We are dealing with very atypical conditions, much of which you guys have already heard or understand when it comes to the fuels out there, in the forest model especially. We are seeing historic record-breaking low fuel moistures both in the live fuels and in the dead fuels. Just without getting too much down into the science of fire behavior, when we're out there assessing the risk and the projections of rates of spread and those types of things, you have to look at the live fuel moisture and the dead fuel moisture, because the fuel model that we're fighting fire in right now up in the timber is comprised of both. You have living trees, you have living brush, but you also have the dead needles, the cast below the tree canopy. So just to give you some perspective, or just some rough numbers, the live fuel moisture, which is a very critical moisture measurement for this fuel model, it gets very extreme or critical at about 75%. And if you want the calculations of how to get that number, sidebar with me later, because I don't want to do a bunch of math. But it's at 60 right now. So it tells you we're already below. And that's indicative of what? 2 years of no rain or snow. No ground moisture. So the live fuels are stressed right now, a little sooner than they should be, about a month sooner. We also look at the dead fuels. The dead fuels are also very low. They're in that critical range because we're not getting any humidity recovery. Add to that the last few days after this fire started, we have the other ingredient that's critical to fire weather and fire behavior, which is instability in the atmosphere. And that's just weather. We can't control that. So thunderstorms, etc. All that added together, you have the kind of fire behavior and the rates of spread that we have seen on the rim fire over the last week. I can tell you this is my 23rd fire season, and I count in fire seasons, and there's only been a couple of times where I have seen that many days in a row of such exponential growth. And it's pretty amazing. Some of the pictures, these are my pictures taken from the very beginning up to the last couple of days. When the fire started, it was down on what's called Jawbone Ridge, which burned in 1987 and then has burned subsequently in some of the fire history. In Stanislaus, especially the Groveland district, for those that have been around a long time know that the Stanislaus and especially the Groveland has a tremendous amount of fire history. So it all burned in 87, and then it's burned again in other fires. The Rogi fire, the Pilot fire, the Yosemite, the Tuolumne fire, all have been around in this area. Regardless, when the brush comes back, it can burn again. So it started down in the brush. We know it's human caused. There was no lightning in the area, but we don't know the exact cause, what it was. Highly suspected there might have been some sort of illicit, grove, marijuana grove type thing, but it doesn't really matter at this point. When it started, it was zero access, literally 0-foot access. The only way to get to the fire was either to fly to it or to hike up the Clavey from the confluence of the Tuolumne and the Clavey rivers. So that first day, it was Saturday of last week, it did a pretty impressive run up what would be the south side of the Clavey, north side of Jawbone Ridge, still to the north of the Tuolumne River. And that's what we saw that first day. Kind of started and went straight up the hill, in the brush marl. Okay, in the brush marl, not in the timber. And then what happened is it began to work around the edges, and as you can imagine, because of all the fire activity across the state and the west, resources were slim, and a fire that's out in the middle of a brush surrounded by rivers on all sides with no immediate threats, our priority for resource ordering is low. And that's just the reality of fire business. I mean, there are layers above my pay grade that make those decisions on how to allocate all the aviation assets, ground assets, based on priority, threats, needs, etc. So, how do you bump yourself up in priority? You get bigger. And it did that. And despite our best efforts to contain it on Jawbone, the weather came in, and what happened in one afternoon, I think there's one slide, I'll have to just watch as it moves around, where it actually jumps, right? So it burns up, it slops over Jawbone Ridge, it backs down into the Tuolumne drainage, and then as expected, it jumps across the Tuolumne. So that's day one, rather benign. It jumps across the Tuolumne, and when it jumped across, the up canyon winds, which is the way it flows during the day, and then down at night, there's both columns going. It's now on both sides of the river, and there it goes. Okay, with the wind. Once you get fire, especially in this type of a season, once you get that type of energy going and that much surface area involved, it begins to go very quickly. It jumped the Clavey at that point, and so now it has access to the terrain north of the Clavey and to the stuff south of the Tuolumne River. And it's all being pushed kind of easterly at the same time. What I can tell you now, it's 105,000 acres as of the IR flight, which I have a map that I can send around last night. Every night we have a fixed-wing aircraft that flies over the fire and takes infrared pictures and tells us exactly where the fire perimeter is and where there might be spots out in front. So it went from 800 to 10,000 to 30 to 50 to 105. And in one of those things, it has a perimeter of 105. I want everybody to remember that just because we say that, that doesn't mean you have 105,000 acres of moonscape. It doesn't do that. Fire doesn't do that. It might burn that way in certain areas, but a lot of that, what's now what we call inside the fire perimeter, will look relatively untouched. In fact, it did a lot of good. The canopy is still intact. It consumes the leaf litter, the ground fuels, all the debris, and it's much like what we would do in a prescribed fire. So a lot of times people have that misconception that when we plot down 105,000 acres, they think they're going to go to the moon when they go to Yosemite. That's not the case. Okay, it's not the case at all. Yes, there are going to be areas that have high severity, that we call severity. But there are more than enough areas that did not burn like that. What's happening now? The team is transitioning to a Type 1 team. We are a Type 2 team, and teams are typed by not only how many team members they carry, but roughly the complexity of the incident. And as you can imagine, how this thing has rapidly progressed over the last 6 days, the complexity has ratcheted way up. We're getting involved in the park. We've closed down a significant entrance to the park with an impending holiday weekend. And the economic impacts that has in the 120 corridor. The various private inholdings that have been impacted outside the park. So it ups the complexity quite a bit. There's a team that has come in. There was no localized, or what we would say, Region 5, which is California, Type 1 team available. They're all engaged already due to activity in the state and the West. That's fine. We have a national rotation, which covers that type of possibility. This team is coming out of Georgia, which was kind of unique. And I've worked with folks from the Southeast, and they're great people, and the team are well qualified. They just lack the experience sometimes dealing with this fuel model. So what they're doing is they're holding our team over longer than usual so they can shadow us and gain all the knowledge, and we can in essence download all that information, that localized information of what we've done, which is a really smart move on that team's part, to utilize that local asset and that local knowledge, and not just say, thanks, we got it, and then kick everybody out. Okay? So that's happening. What you also have happening is a tremendous, now we've gone what's called unified command with CAL FIRE. Once it became a threat and burned some of the state's responsibility area, some of the area underneath Groveland and in some of the local private property that's surrounded by the forest, that's the state's responsibility. So we've entered into unified command. So we have a command, an incident commander from CAL FIRE and an incident commander from this federal team. And they are working together and coordinating the assets and the allocation and location of those assets. And I can tell you firsthand, you have a huge, what's called contingency force that is pre-positioned now in Tuolumne. So for those that are concerned about it approaching the Tuolumne side, and what do we have in place to deal with that, you have, I don't know the totals, I'd have to get those totals, they were still coming in, but you have in upwards of 10 to 15 Type 1 or big structure engine strike teams. Strike teams are 5 engines. So do the math. There's a lot of resources that are coming into town. We have come to #1 in the state in terms of priority. We have both DC-10s allocated to our fire. So for those that have seen that asset, that aviation asset, it is tremendous. It is a huge commercial airliner that's been converted to drop retardant. Before that was put in service, our biggest air tanker in the federal fleet was roughly 3,000 gallons. The DC-10 is capable of anywhere from 15 to 20,000 gallons a time. So you can see the economics of scale, and not only that, but just how much volume they can put down to handle the difficult fuels in the timber model. For those that are down in the Tuolumne or concerned about that access of the fire to Tuolumne, the fuel type changes. We get out of the forest and we get into the more grass and light brush and oak woodland type fuel model, where air assets and ground resources can really do a lot of damage to a fire's approach because the fuels are so much lighter. Now I understand the concern, and mine too, is it turning and coming up and staying with the timber and looking at the 108 corridor. That same contingency resource is now available to be moved as a whole force. So you have a whole, what's called a supervisor, a contingency group supervisor, whose job is to run that armada of assets and move it as the fire moves. It's not stuck in Tuolumne by us in that regard. It is a flexible, movable. Right now, it's in Tuolumne just because it's the most logical staging point to bring everybody in and logistically support them. So as the fire moves, that asset will move. Realistically, what it did is it moved north because of our southwest winds aloft. It turned and went into the park, which is good. because it'll hit rock, it'll slow down, and what that means, instead of a head fire coming our direction, we have what's called a flanking fire. Much less intensity. Very effective to pick up a flanking fire versus a head fire coming right at you. So we're sitting really, really well as a grouping of communities along the 108 corridor and Twain for all these assets not only in place, but a change in fire behavior. And the main force of the fire has gone past and gone off to the northeast. When fire gets that big, as you guys see, I haven't seen, other than some of these pictures that, there's one picture of the column that was taken from a plane that was sent to me. And when a fire gets that big, it becomes plume dominated is the term we use, meaning it creates its own weather. It doesn't matter what the surrounding winds and weather are doing, it does its own thing. Obviously makeup didn't work, nor did my car wash work this morning. My vehicle, the day it made its first run, it not only generated its own lightning inside the smoke column, but it rained like an ash rain out of the column. Because all the ingredients of a thunderstorm are there. It's just the lifting mechanism is the fire itself, not the heating of the surface. You have the instability, you have the moisture released by the fuels, you have the heat from below, the whole thing lifts and goes to 35,000, 40,000 feet, everything condenses, gravity takes over, and it comes out. So it's like an ash rain, like almost like a volcano thing. So needless to say, a lot of assets have been mobilized, both from Tuolumne County, local government, Tuolumne County CAL FIRE, Calaveras County, Mariposas County, all our surrounding county cooperators have engaged, rightfully so. And now what you have is a river in the pond that is expanding to pull in additional resources as the fire grows. We are number one. We have pretty much everything in California right here at our doorstep and our disposal. So sitting really, really, really fat compared to a few days ago when our priority was low. And as a division, it's very frustrating because you see a target of opportunity, ask for the aviation asset, because some of this country is so steep and rugged, to put crews in, it's not going to work. And not to give it not an excuse, but just to preface, a lot of the crews, the hand crews, hotshot crews, Type 2 crews, are a little scared right now. And that might be the wrong term to use, but very leery. Let's use that term. And why? Because of what just happened in Arizona. Okay, to watch 19 of your own get taken out in one afternoon, rightfully so. Everybody's a little bit leery, a little cautious, and I respect that. So the only other way we can get after stuff when there's no road access is the aviation asset, and we're getting what's called UTFs, or unable to fill, because they're higher priorities. Well, that's not the case. So we have that asset, that arsenal of aviation, which really, really makes the ground resources gain ground, be able to make progress very, very quickly. It's very difficult when the fuels are of this type, in this condition, without that aviation application, and then coming in behind the ground resources to lock it down. We can drop retardant on it, it'll check it up for a little while, but because of the nature of the fuels, it generally, eventually, will chew through that line. So you have to bring the ground resources in. But they work hand in hand. Right now, again, the team is transitioning. I'm going to stay on and provide assistance and local knowledge. I am going to move my assignment over. I made that request to their chief this morning, and he said absolutely. I'm going to move. For the last few days, I was committed to the southeast corner of the fire, and I'm going to move over to the northwest corner, which is the division right below us. So I'll be interfacing with them directly, and any updates should the need arise for another town hall meeting, which I do not expect this kind of turnout, but I appreciate it. I would be able to do that. I'll be getting that direct information and access to the team and all their thoughts. Realistically now, they're relying on us. They're new, they're out of the area, they're just getting familiar, they need that local knowledge. So that is important for us to stay on board, at least some of us that are local. I would love to be able to give you an estimated containment date. I would love to tell you what size it will be and what shape it will be when it's done. If I could do that, then I probably wouldn't be here because I would have predicted the winning lotto ticket. Right? I would be somewhere else.
I think what's on most of our minds is what kind of danger of danger is our community, further to the south and west in, like Tuolumne City. So what's your thought, and what does experience tell you?
I think everybody should be very cognizant of what's going on every day. They should stay in touch with the news, the updates. They should find out where it is. There's a variety of sources for that. When I get a chance, I can write down a great website address.